Hey readers, good morning and welcome. I am excited today because I've been thinking about this video for a while and really put some thought into it. And what I wanted to do today is to suggest some books about love on this Valentine's week. And they're maybe a little non-traditional. So they're about the love we find, the love we lose, and sometimes the love that we find again. Some of them are a little bit more of a traditional romantic love. Some of them are about self-love. Some of them are about love that doesn't always go in the way that we plan. I think Valentine's week can be a tricky one for a lot of people. There's an expectation that people are in a long-term, beautiful, wonderful relationship, and oftentimes we are in and out of relationship with other people. We are in and out of romance. We are in and out of connection with ourselves and with others. So today, I just wanted to share some books that may or may not be a traditional Valentine Day choice and see what you think. And if you have read them, let me know. And if you haven't, let me know what you're planning to read this week. I have a really neat read to tell you about at the end of the video today. So let's get started. One of my favorite reads last year was Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfield. Now, this is a very complex story that begins with the apparent death of a child brought in by a man who found her in the water. The story itself is about the journey of this child and trying to find out who she is and how this happened to her. But as it unfolds, it is truly a story about love in all forms, about love of family, about love of partner and husband and wife, about love of place. It is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. Diane Setterfield is one of my favorite authors. I actually just watched the 13th Tale movie this weekend finally, and I really did like the adaptation, but she is a terrific storyteller, and I highly encourage you to take a look at this if you haven't already. A great story. Next, one of my other favorites that really surprised me is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. Eleanor isn't a particularly lovable character in the beginning of this book, so it reminded me when I was thinking about my favorite stories about love, how much I did fall in love with her by the end. It isn't a traditional love story. Eleanor is actually in love with someone who is a singer in a band, and she's never even met him. But she has a lot of other difficulties in her life, and a story of not being loved is very prevalent in this novel. I loved this book. I loved all of the nuances of all of the relationships, the friendships, the challenges, the growth that Eleanor achieves during this novel is incredible, and I highly recommend it if you haven't already taken a look. I guess almost all of these I read last year, maybe just because they're top of mind. That's why I've included them today. This is a traditional love story. It's a novel by Jojo Moyes, who is famous for writing some love stories, and this is The Last Letter from Your Lover. It was one of my Advent Book Exchange books that I read almost right away in December of last year. This follows a woman who is a socialite married to a kind of off-putting guy, to me anyway, but lives this great life of luxury. And one night, a journalist who is divorced and is pretty rough around the edges and has a bit of a drinking problem shows up for a dinner party at their home. And there is a bit of a distaste for each other in that initial meeting, but they soon form a relationship that may or may not be something that they want, and is very complicated. this is a dual timeline, so they begin to write letters and notes to each other, sometimes notes of apology for being drunk and disorderly. And then later, those notes and letters are found by someone else. And there's just a beautifully woven movement from the past to a more present time. I really liked this novel, and I don't read a lot of romance. Perhaps that's why I have chosen such odd choices for this video, but this one is probably my favorite of hers, and maybe my favorite romance that I read all last year in terms of a strict traditional, meet, love, tragedy, maybe, those kinds of things. That type of plot was really great. Waking Up in Paris is nonfiction. It's a novel by Sonia Choquette that I read last year. You may or may not have watched that video when I read this as a part of a readathon, but this is a memoir, a very short memoir by a psychic. I think she coaches people or does some personal development work with folks as well, but she is fantastic in her way of writing just a real raw story of her life. And this actually is a story of her coming back to herself and falling in love with Paris after she leaves the United States because she's gotten a divorce, and she leaves and goes to a place that she's totally been before and has fallen in love with before, in order to discover what she wants to do next and how to kind of put her life back together and recover from the pain and hurt of being divorced. It was, sorry, I have a piece of hair in my eye. It was really nice. I read it really quickly, and she's very real. She's very raw, also funny, and it's just a neat little escape. So if you love Paris and you love novels about sort of coming back to oneself and to that self-love and self-determination and commitment, you'll enjoy it. And then The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein. Oh, this book wrecked me last year. It is a lovely love story about a man who falls in love with a lab. And we've had a lab, and we have a lab mix now. And so I get falling in love with the pet. It's the story of their connection to each other, their start of their relationship, and then the character is also meets a woman, and there's a relationship there too. So it's their journey, their story arc. Of course, it is not always easy, and there's a lot of tough topics covered in this novel, but I'm so glad I read it. Even if I sobbed crying after, I'm really, really happy that I did read it. It was definitely worth the read. So this month, what I'm reading in this kind of romance category is there's two books that are on my list, and one that I added after my TBR was complete that I may or may not get to, but I'm very interested in reading it at some point, and I do have it now as ebook from my library because I suggested they buy it, and they did, and then I got bumped to the top of the list. But the first one is A Long Fatal Love Chase by Louisa May Alcott. This is a manuscript that she wrote and never was published. It was rejected by the publisher, and it was found a long, long time later in both its original form and an edited form, possibly edited by her sister, as I discovered as I was reading the end notes. But it's a beautiful, beautiful novel cover, and it has sweet end papers with a photo of Louisa May Alcott. I'm just at the beginning of it, but I already can tell I'm going to love it. It's the story of a woman whose name is Rosamond, and she meets a man who is who's a friend of her father's, and she's very unhappy in her father's home, and this man, Philip Tempest, comes in, and they strike a friendship at first that turns into more, and then apparently it becomes a very tragic kind of relationship, and there's a desire to get away and to hide from this person who isn't what he seemed. And so it's not, again, a traditional romance, but intriguing to me and dark and set in the Victorian era. And it just so far is delicious. I love it. And then the other one that I'm thinking about picking up this month, and I hear it's a quick read, is The Bromance Book Club by Lyssa K. Adams. I think that's her name. Yes, Lyssa K. Adams. A lot of people are reading this and have really enjoyed it. So it made me, again, take a look to see if my library had it, and they didn't. And so I recommended it and had no idea they would get it immediately after I recommended it. They probably had decided to do it anyway. But it's a story of I think he's a football player named Gavin, whose marriage is kind of not connected. Things aren't going well. And so his wife, Thea, asks him for a divorce, and he is at odds and uncertain of what to do next. And he discovers a secret men's book club in Nashville. My assumption is that they read romance novels, but that's an assumption. And he joins this book club and finds sort of an unlikely turnaround for himself, I guess, at least. I don't know if it has a happy ending, but I do know that it's very popular and it sounds cute to me. And so if I'm thinking about what I want to read this Valentine's Day, those things probably, not on the day, but this week, those things probably are rising to the top. So I'm going to focus on the Louisa May Alcott this week for myself, and then maybe start the Bromance Book Club too. We'll see what happens. Let me know what you're reading on this week. It's not a favorite for a lot of people, and so I really wanted to give you a variety of things that you could read and listen to in order to, just enjoy the week in whatever way you can. I wish you the love that you desire for yourself and the love that you choose to give to others, and a very happy reading day. Bye.